Patton looked controlled on screen, yet behind the scenes, it was unpredictable. Tanks slipped, storms destroyed sets, and accidents shaped the film in surprising ways. These new covered facts reveal how chaotic the journey was while bringing the general back to life. Wheel 1, a tank nearly ran over the camera crew. You don't expect a real tank to behave like a loose animal, yet that is exactly what happened during one of the outdoor maneuver shots. The ground looked stable enough for the stunt, but underneath the top layer, the desert sand was soft and uneven. As the tank rolled forward, the tread slipped, and the huge machine veered off its mark by several feet. At first, nobody reacted because they thought the vehicle was making a planned turn. Then, someone screamed when they saw the tank drifting straight toward the camera platform. The crew froze for a moment, unsure whether the driver would recover control or not. The shouts grew louder as the tank picked up momentum and headed for the raised stand where the camera team was positioned. The driver braked hard, but the sand made the stopping distance unpredictable. A cameraman standing closest to the edge stepped back just in time. The metal tread missed him by seconds. Dust flew everywhere, and the tank finally came to a stop with everyone's heart still pounding. That close call changed the way the crew worked. From that day on, every setup involving vehicles required marked escape paths, designated spotters, and ground checks. Even the extras heard the story, and whenever a tank rolled in their direction, people kept one eye on their marks and one eye on the nearest clear exit. The close call rattled everyone, and the tension on set rose because no one knew what strange accident would strike next. 2. Scott's horse threw him during training. George C. Scott wanted every riding scene to feel natural, so he trained near the battlefield set where explosions and smoke were common. The rehearsal seemed ordinary until a stray pyrotechnic pop echoed across the field. The sound was unexpected and sharp. Scott's horse flinched, reared up, and threw him onto the ground before anyone could react. The fall looked rough. Dust shot into the air as Scott hit the ground with a heavy thud. Crew members rushed over, expecting him to be injured, but Scott pushed them away and stood up quickly. He brushed off the dirt, grabbed the reins again, and mounted without hesitation. The determination shocked everyone watching, especially after a fall that could have seriously hurt him. That moment forced the effects team to rethink their approach. They understood how easily animals could react to noise, so they adopted new timing rules. Explosions and flare cues were delayed whenever horses were involved. Hand signals replaced verbal calls to avoid loud surprises. The adjustments protected both riders and animals, and the lessons stayed with the crew for the rest of the production. People whispered about the incident all afternoon, and the mood shifted because it felt like the production kept inviting unpredictable moments. 3. A real Civil War shell was found under the set. The trenches looked like a normal film set, but underneath the soil lay a forgotten relic from an older conflict. While digging space for a camera trench, workers hit something solid. At first, they thought it was a rock. Then the shape became clear, and silence fell around the pit. They had uncovered an unexploded artillery shell from the Spanish Civil War. Only a few seconds passed before the crew backed away from the area. Word spread across the location that they had a live shell buried beneath the dirt. Bomb technicians arrived within the hour, examined the surface, and ordered an evacuation. Even seasoned crew members felt their stomachs tighten as they watched the experts prepare to remove the shell. The technicians lifted it with extreme care and carried it out of the work zone. When they confirmed it was stable enough to move, the crew exhaled in relief. But the scare wasn't over. The surrounding ground had to be scanned for more potential hazards. Metal detectors swept the entire area, and each beat made everyone pause for a second. After hours of checking, the site was cleared, and production finally resumed. The discovery added tension to every digging sequence afterward, because the team knew the land still held pieces of a past war. Even after the area was cleared, nerves stayed sharp, because the discovery reminded everyone that the ground itself carried its own dangers. 4. A windstorm erased the battlefield overnight. Spain's weather can turn without warning, and the production learned that the hard way. One night, a violent windstorm swept across the open battlefield set. The gusts arrived long after the crew had left for the evening. By sunrise, the entire area looked like a different world. Tents were torn from their stakes, barbed wire props were scattered across dunes, and flags were ripped from their poles. Sandbags were half buried under mounds of shifting earth. Crew members walked onto the site the next morning and stopped in shock. Equipment that had been carefully placed the night before had vanished under waves of sand. Costumes lay half-covered, tools were spread out like debris after a storm surge, and footprints from the previous shoot had disappeared completely. It looked like the desert had swallowed the set during the night. That morning became a quiet example of how unpredictable outdoor filming can be. The wind erased hours of work, yet the crew rebuilt it all before cameras started rolling. The resilience became part of the film's behind-the-scenes legend, and people still bring up how the set disappeared and returned in the span of a single night. Workers kept rebuilding in silence, and the crew pushed forward because they knew the next shooting window could slip away fast. 5. A prop jeep caught fire. During a stunt misfire, stunts on war films look controlled on camera, but behind the scenes they can turn unpredictable fast. During one of the action setups, the team prepared a flamethrower effect meant to create a wall of fire behind a jeep. The cue was tested, timed, and rehearsed, but the heat from the blast stretched farther than expected. The flames shot out in a sharp arc and reached the jeep's fuel line. At first, the fire looked like part of the stunt. Then someone noticed the flames crawling under the frame, licking the metal edges and sparking beneath the hood. Actors standing nearby stepped back, unsure whether the fire was still under control. The heat grew stronger as it worked its way toward the front tires. For a moment, nobody knew how quickly the flames would spread. The effects team rushed in with fire blankets, shouting for everyone to clear the path. They threw the blankets over the burning section and smothered each patch until the flames died. Smoke hissed out from under the fabric while the Jeep continued to crackle. When the last ember faded, the crew exhaled in relief. They moved the vehicle away for inspection while safety officers gathered the team for an immediate review. The fire forced everyone to slow down and rethink the entire stunt. The officers rewrote the protocols, adjusting the flame angle, the distance markers, and the timing of the cues. The new rules required additional spotters around every vehicle. Only when the safety team approved the setup did they allow another take. What looked like a simple explosion on screen now carried the weight of a real scare behind it. The fire shook the team and sparked new precautions because every stunt suddenly felt more fragile than anyone wanted to admit. 6. A tank door slammed on Scott's fingers. George C. Scott approached every scene with total commitment, and that intensity often pulled him into risky territory. During a close-up inside one of the tanks, he climbed up the side using the metal handles attached to the hull. The steel hatch above him was supposed to stay open, but a sudden shift in weight made it swing down faster than anyone expected. The hatch came down with force and trapped Scott's fingers between the door and the rim. He let out a sharp reaction that froze the crew. The impact struck two of his knuckles hard enough to bruise them immediately. A makeup artist rushed over while others asked him to step aside for treatment, but Scott brushed them off. He wrapped his fingers with tape, flexed his hand a few times, and prepared for the next shot. The crew watched him closely for signs of strain, yet Scott refused to slow down. Instead, the injury added a raw edge to his movements. Every gesture carried a hint of real pain, and the tension in his hands made his performance feel sharper. It was an accident no one wanted, but the result gave several scenes a subtle charge that felt truthful on camera. After the incident, the team checked every tank hatch on set. Springs were adjusted, hinges were padded, and warning calls were added before anyone climbed inside. The crew understood how even a moment of carelessness around heavy machinery could turn dangerous. People noticed Scott gripping props tighter afterward, and the energy shifted because the injury added real weight to everything he touched. 7. Too much smoke blinded. The entire battlefield battle scenes rely on fog and smoke to create the illusion of chaos. But this time, the effect grew far beyond what anyone planned. The machines were set to produce a low, drifting haze across the ground. The intention was to create a layer of smoke that complemented the explosions without overwhelming visibility. Instead, the output surged as the machines pumped out more fog than expected. Within seconds, a white cloud rose into the air and climbed over the actors. It swallowed the entire crew and turned the battlefield into a blank wall of smoke. People shouted through the haze, but their voices sounded distant. The lights disappeared behind the cloud, and the cameras lost sight of everything. Extras began coughing as the thick air clogged the space between them. The director called for an immediate stop. Crew members waved their hands in front of their faces, trying to find a clear path. The haze lingered stubbornly, hanging over the set like a fog bank that refused to move. Ventilation fans were rolled into position and pointed at the thickest areas. Over several minutes, the fog finally began to drift away, revealing faces, equipment, and props that had been hidden in the white blur. Everyone regrouped and adjusted the machines. They cut the output settings, trimmed the timing, and added test bursts before each take. The scare reminded them that even simple atmospheric effects can become overwhelming when weather, wind, and timing collide. The finished scene looks smooth on screen, yet the crew still jokes about the day the battlefield vanished in front of their eyes. When the haze finally cleared, everyone moved slower because the sudden blindness warned them how fast a controlled scene could collapse. 8. A soldier extra collapsed from heat stroke. The Spanish heat became its own enemy during filming. Temperatures climbed into triple digits while the cast stood in heavy wool uniforms designed to represent the World War era. The fabric trapped heat against the skin and turned long marching scenes into exhausting endurance tests. Extras lined up in formation, waiting for the cameras to roll while beads of sweat ran down their faces. During one of the marches, an extra in the middle of the line stumbled and collapsed. The fall broke the rhythm of the formation and startled the performers around him. People rushed over, calling for medics as the heat continued to bear down on the field. The actor lay still for a moment before medics cooled him with water and cold towels. After several minutes, he regained consciousness and sat up with help from the crew. The moment created a ripple of concern across the entire set. Production leaders realized the conditions were more dangerous than they had assumed. They implemented mandatory shade breaks, water rounds, and rest intervals. Tents were set up between takes so performers could cool down. The crew made sure no one stood in direct sunlight longer than necessary. The changes brought relief to everyone working under the harsh weather. The collapse served as a clear reminder of how demanding war films can be, not just for lead actors, but for every extra standing in uniform under the open sky. The collapse forced the production to rethink breaks, and the tone changed because the heat kept showing itself as the real threat. Do subscribe to our channel if you like this breakdown of the crazy facts of amazing movies.